Okay? And then notice right above the y equals button, it says stat plot. Okay? That's what we want. That's going to set up making a scatter plot here. So second stat plot. Okay? Make sure you hit the second first because it's in the blue. All right? And then your plots might be turned on. They might be turned off. Mine are turned off. There might be some other kind of graph. Mine are histograms right now. I want to change those. So if you hit enter, go into plot 1, and we can start changing some things up here. Okay? So first of all, we want to turn it on. So make sure you hit enter, and the on is highlighted. And then if you arrow up and down, you can go through all the rest of the stuff here. Okay, so the type. Which one of these do you suppose I want on the type? Which one looks like a scatter plot? First one. Okay. So I want a scatter plot. And then it's going to ask for the X list and the Y list. Okay? So what that means is when you do a scatter plot, you have an X-axis and a Y-axis on your graph, right? So what data do you want to go where? Do you want the time on the X and the minimum wage on the Y, or do you want the time on the Y and the minimum wage on the X? Which way do you think makes the most sense? Time on the X. Usually time is going to be your X variable. Yeah. So where did we put the time in? What list was it? L1, 2, or 3? L1. So that's set up the way we want it, right? X list is your L1. Time is going to be on the X. And L2 was the minimum wage, so that's going to be on the Y. So we aren't going to change that at all. That's just the way we want it. Does anybody have that showing something different, though? Should default to that. So okay, good. And then the mark is just, what do you want your dot to look like? Okay, when it graphs it. I like the boxes because they're easier to see. If it's just one little pixel, sometimes it's hard to pick out. Otherwise, you can make the little plus signs, too, if you want. It's just up to you, whatever you feel like makes the most sense. The reason they have some different ones there is if you do two scatter plots on top of each other, then you can tell which one is which. Okay? So, but I'm going to stick with the box for this one, because like I said, I think that's easier to see. So this is all set. We can second quit out of there. Okay? So far, two things that we've done. We put the data in. We've created the stat plot. Now we need to actually graph the thing. So first thing you want to double check, because it'll yell at you sometimes, is to make sure if you have anything in your y equals that's all cleared out of there. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of that. And then once that's cleared out, we're going to double check that our window is the right size so that we can see everything. Okay, so that's going to be the third step here, is to go into window. And you have your X min, X max, X scale, Y min, Y max, and Y scale. So let's think about it. X was measuring what? What part of the data was X? Time. What numbers did you actually put in for time? 55 to 105, right? So think about X min and max. What would make sense for your X minimum and your X maximum? Yeah, maybe go just a little ways either way. Okay, so 50 would be probably a good min. A max, yeah, maybe 110, a little above. The scale, what do you want to count by? So if it has the little tick marks on the x-axis on the bottom, what do you want it to count by? What do you think would be good? It went up by 5, so if you make the x scale 5, that would make sense. Okay, now the y was minimum wage. So looking at those numbers, what do you think would make sense for min and max and scale and all of that for that one? 0 to 6 seems reasonable, yeah. And then the scale. I might just leave it at 1, right? Goes up $1 every time, so you can kind of see in between where it's at that way. And then the X res at the bottom, that's resolution, and don't worry about that. Just leave that as a 1, and that's fine. Okay, then you should be able to just hit graph and see your scatter plot. Okay, so everybody's got something that looks kind of like mine there? Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to make a second scatter plot, put it on top of this one, but it's going to be the purchasing power one. Okay, So what we're going to do, the data's already in there. We don't need to go back and do that, but we do need to create another stat plot. Okay, so go down to plot 2. Okay. And what I'd like you to do is set up this one the same way we did the last one, but this time make the mark the plus sign instead of the box, or at least something different from the first one that you did, whatever it was. And then see if what I'm doing here matches what you did when you're all done. Oh, you might need some help with this, though. I forgot about that. Your X list should be the same, right? L1, time. That's no different. But your Y list needs to change to L3 instead of L2, right, this time? How do you get that to change? Well, if you look at the bottom of your calculator, and I'll zoom it in here real quick for you because it's kind of dark, hard to see. So I don't know if you guys can see that, but do you see where it's got the little L1, L2, L3, L4, all in there? Okay, that's where you go grab them. Okay, so if you want to put in an L3, you'd have to go second, 3, and that'll put L3 in there for you. So back up here, where I've got Y list is L3, that's how you go get L3 to change that. Okay? Back that up a little bit. All right, and then remember, we're going to do the little plus sign this time. So, the window should still be good. The purchasing power, oh, it does go a little above 6, doesn't it? So we're going to have to adjust what then? The Y max, right? Yeah. So if we go back into our window, let's adjust that a little bit. So Y max, put it up to 7. Yeah, 7 will work. Okay. Go back to graph. Boom. There's the purchasing power with our minimum wage. Okay. So anybody not to this point or need help? Yeah.
At that point, you make it like the graph. Or is that just...
I can't without resetting your calculator.
All right.
So
do you think it'll matter at all?
mm-mm.
All right.
You just can't see the x-axis, so that'll might make things a little bit more difficult. But I mean, if you just remember that every one of these is 5 years, starting at 55, then you should be fine. Yeah. But later on, once we're done with this, I'll fix that for you. So looking at the graphs, let's see if we can answer some questions. Okay, I'm going to remove the calculator from up here, but be looking at your own as we move ahead here and see if you can answer these questions. So the first one is, in what year did the worker enjoy the highest purchasing power? Now that one you might be able to just get off the table too. This one is kind of an easy question that way. But what year was it? When was the purchasing power the best? Yeah. 1970. Mm-hmm. So what does that tell us? And this is getting more into maybe like less math, more social stuff. But if the purchasing power in 1970 was the best, and based on what you know about purchasing power, what does that tell you? Yeah, the country in general was more wealthy. People earning minimum wage could get more with their money in 1970 compared to any other time. Yep. Okay. When did the minimum wage increase the most? So between what period? Okay. So for this one, you could look at the table and try and answer this question, or if you want to look at the graph and see if you can get the answer from there. You could do that as well. But between what 5-year period do we see the biggest jump in the minimum wage? Okay, so between what 2 years? Or, yeah, between what 5? Yeah, from 1975 to 1980. Okay. Okay, so on the table, you know, if you just did some quick calculations in your head, you just think how much did it go up, how much did it go up, how much did it go up. This went up a whole $1 between those 2 5 years, and we didn't have an increase like that anywhere else. Okay, nothing quite that big. Also, if you were looking at the graph, okay, can you pinpoint on the graph where 1975 and 1980 are? Where do you see the biggest increase there? It's right here, right? Between these two. 55, 60, 65, 70, 75. See how we get the biggest leap up is between those two. Okay? So that's represented on the graph too.